Hello and welcome to week 9 of Cinema 130. This week we'll be talking about directing. We have a really exciting lesson. A lot has changed in the field of directing, including a lot of female directors getting opportunities. We'll talk about that. So let's get down to it. All right. Okay, here we go. Directing. We're talking about mise en scene, and we'll be talking about staging and directing performance. All right. So, week 9, directing. Follow along in your book. We'll be dealing with pages 34 through 37. Now, this module only has 2 units. This is our shortest module, directing and acting. Then we have a quiz. That's quiz 3 in week 11. Okay. And then we have our case study 3 due in week 12. That's going to be on Birdman, a really fantastic film you're going to enjoy. And of course, don't forget about your homework. All right. So on directing, the director is the visionary for the film. They hold the entire vision from dialogue to editing in their head. The best ones are prepared, have a plan, and an aesthetic they want to convey. Now, here are some fantastic quotes on directing from James Cameron, Greta Gerwig, and Christopher Nolan. I'll let you read those on your own. The director is like the boss on the set, like the captain on a ship, okay? He's directing where the camera's going to go, directing the performance, and then he's evaluating whether it's good. So remember, the producer built the ship. The director's the captain, and the investors who put up money, they paid for it. Director plans the shoot, deciding camera position, blocking actors, telling everybody where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And the director, he directs the other creatives and draws from their ideas. Now, he had a hand in hiring these people. So who am I talking about? The cinematographer, the production designer, the costume designer, the sound designer, the editor, the music supervisor. All those folks he's working with directly, the composer, throughout the process of making the film. His number one job is conveying his vision to the actors and coaching their performance, making sure he gets the performance that he wants. The director is watching performance and building the emotional arc with the actors. Here we see a scene from Gravity with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. They command a large set with many extras. In the old school, they used to be like a general over an army. Okay, you've got hundreds of extras running around, things exploding. It's quite a different style. But also they must have attention to detail. Here we see Quentin Tarantino on the set of Django, and he's looking at a detail on how the camera is going to frame up with the gun and so on and so forth. So director is the artistic visionary for the film. The major creative decisions are made by the director. They create the aesthetic and the tone for the film. They set up the shots, direct the action, and evaluate the performances, okay? They determine if a take is good or if more shooting is needed. They guide the editing and sound choices in post to finish the film. Okay, so we're on page 34 of your book if you're following along. So they have created during development, that's the early stages. We haven't even really got any money yet. They have creative meetings with the producers. They might try to cast their leads, the big stars, because stars bring money, right? And they might be tweaking the script, developing the script further and tailoring it to the stars that they're casting. Now, pre-production, the script is complete. The film has been greenlit. It has financing, it has money. So they're going to prep, scene analysis, script breakdown, storyboards. They're going to hire the department heads. That's your key creatives. That's the DP, the production designer, the sound designer, the editor, the composer, the music supervisor. Okay. Production meetings, planning, budgets, scheduling, creative meetings, reviewing the designs, the creative choices. Do we like this costume? Do we like this set? Locations, scout and pick locations, meetings, rehearsals, and planning the schedule for the shoot. Now we're in production, we're shooting. Okay, so we're going to have plenty of meetings still. But then once we're on set, okay, once we're on set, here we see Christopher Nolan with his eye on the eyepiece. We're going to be dealing with something called mise en scene. This is a French term which means to place on set. Okay, just basically arrange things. So we got camera placement, framing, shot size, blocking actors, performance, and then creative decisions like, the look of a scene, the lighting. Do we like this costume? Do we like this shirt or this other shirt? Editing. Okay, now we're into a post-production. Okay, again, more creative meetings and production meetings. There's lots of meetings in making a film to figure out what you're going to do. You don't start working until you've decided the direction. So you have editing, sound, special effects, and also music and score. And even things like titles, graphics, reshoots, things that you figure out in editing that you might need that you might not have known before. So here's a few directors on directing. David Fincher says, in film, we sculpt time, we sculpt behavior, and we sculpt light. Okay. To be a director requires incredible decision-making skills. You are the captain of the ship. You hold the vision. You say, no, we're going to put the actors here. We're going to have them do this, and we're going to light it this way. Okay. Film director is one of the world's most coveted jobs. To get there, you must be talented, lucky, and relentless. Okay, so let's hear from Quentin Tarantino on exactly what a director does.
You've had a lot of people, and you have been influenced by a lot of what you have seen, a lot of what you've read and studied and all of that. Terry Gilliam gave you some advice before you made Reservoir Dogs. You remember what it was?
Yeah, I sure do. You see movies and they can be full of vision, and you want your movies to be like that, but you see these other movies that don't have any vision, but I'm sure the director tried. So what's the difference between this guy versus that guy? How was this guy able to get this on the screen, and how was this guy not able to get this on the screen? I'm sure if I talked to that guy, he'd tell all these, I'm sure he wanted that. Who knows? And I was afraid of being that guy. I want to be that guy. And well, Terry Gilliam definitely has a vision. 2, 3, 4 ways about it. So we were at Sundance, and there was like a lunch going on at the picnic tables there, and everyone else FO'd. And it was just me and him talking, which was a thrill. And I go, look, you have a very specific vision in your movies, and it's right there on the screen. How do you do that? How do you get that vision that's in your head? How do you get it on the screen? And he said, well, Quentin, you have to understand, as a director, you don't have to do that. Your job is to hire talented people who can do that. You hire a cinematographer who can get the kind of quality that you want. You don't have to be able to know how to take the lights and move them around to create an effect. You hire a talented costume designer who can give the colors that you need and the flamboyance or not that you want. You hire a production designer who can do that. Your job is explaining your vision. Your job is articulating to them what you want on the screen. And then all of a sudden, the whole mystical, shamanistic thing that I thought directing was just went boop, and I realized I could do that.
Okay, pretty interesting comments there. A good summation by Tarantino. So what does a director do? They're reading scripts, maybe films that they want to direct. Maybe they get sent a script and offered a job to direct. So they're going to read it and see if it's something they want to be involved in. They could also write the script. Many great directors, especially young creative directors, are involved in the writing of a script. They write it from scratch themselves, or they get involved with a screenwriter. They change that person's script, whatever. Many different ways that can occur. If they purchase a script or get sent a script, they eventually going to do an analysis, think about how they're going to shoot it. They find the critical moments, the character arcs, and the plot points that they want to emphasize. Okay. And then eventually do something called a script breakdown. The script is broken down for each department to determine what is needed. Each scene is broken down, determine where to shoot, what sets and props are needed, what film equipment is needed. Do we need a crane because we want to do a high angle shot? Okay, do we need dollies? What do we need? And then, of course, the shooting schedule is determined. How are we going to attack this one scene at this one location? The words on the page to actual sets and scenes. So here's from Top Gun Maverick, the new film. And here's a page from that script. You can take a look at that yourself. And here it's describing an aerial maneuver. And we see that on the screen. They put the camera in some sort of, apparently they used real planes. I'm not really sure about that, but so here we see that taking place. We have Val Kilmer's voice being done by AI. Okay, so they had to figure that out. Okay, that was a whole big thing that was a technical leap in the film. And then, of course, in the scene when he's being scolded for his behavior, for what he did here, we see that here. So from words on the page to sets and actual scenes in the action. So here's Hitchcock on directing. So Hitchcock, Alfred Hitchcock is a great director, very famous in Hollywood, very important. He also wrote and talked a lot about directing and making films. So that's why we're going to refer back to him a few times during today's lesson and for advice. So he says, half the work of direction should be accomplished in the script. The main task of the director is to show what people are doing and thinking, and secondarily, what they're saying. The director at the same time must be searching for the greatest economy in his film style. So what does he mean? By economy, he means efficiently telling the story through visuals, not just words. Can the staging convey themes and character motives? Okay. So we have storyboards. These are elaborate drawings that are done to sort of show the crew what the director has in mind. Now, the director doesn't have to do that. This might be a director who sort of sketches them out, but he'll pay an artist to do more elaborate drawings. Okay. Here's some storyboards from the Avengers. You might recognize the scene when Thor and Iron Man fought for the first time. So lots of production meetings with all your creatives, figuring out what you're going to do. Okay. And creative meetings. And very often these aren't necessarily in an office. These could be over dinner. Very often, top stars don't audition. They'll just have a dinner, or the director will come to the house, or there'll be a phone call, or there'll be a dinner. Scouting locations. Oh, where can we shoot? Does this work? What's the best angle? Making creative decisions like about costume and sets. Okay, how do we want the character to appear? Most of this is done before you start shooting. Once you're on set, you want all those decisions to be made. Making notes and planning the shoots. Most directors arrive at production with a clear plan and a shot list for each scene. Then, of course, we have casting. Very important, very important. Half the job of the director is in the casting. If you don't have the right actor, you're going to have a hard time pulling off what you want. If the actor is not up for the role, he's not skilled enough, or if he or she is wrong for the role, it's going to be a problem. So this is the most important job of the director. The director casts most major roles. The casting director will cast the small roles. The director is not going to be involved in casting the butcher who has 2 lines. That's someone else's job. But the main characters, the protagonist, the antagonist, the love interest, maybe a friend or another important character, the director will be involved in casting. So the casting, part of the director's overall vision for the film, must find an actor who can play a character as director sees it. Now, stars don't audition. We see an audition going on here. They might meet with a director. I mean, a star's work is known, and so they're cast for the part if the person think they can play the role. And of course, chemistry between the lead roles must be considered. You can't cast 2 people that that don't look good together and don't have chemistry. More director quotes. So here's a couple of examples. So John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Now, Tarantino wanted to cast him, but the studio balked. His career was on the skids. He was basically on his way out of Hollywood, and he had to convince them with the dance scene. He said, well, I'm going to cast him on this dance scene. It's going to be great. Apparently, Travolta came over to Tarantino's house. They played board games for a few hours, and he was able to convince the studio. Alec Guinness, a very classically trained, very skilled English actor. He lends a lot of gravitas to Star Wars. Okay, he plays Obi-Wan, the great wise sort of wizard. And without him, the film lacks depth. He lends a lot of gravitas to the film with the way he plays the character and seems to really be him. Daniel Kaluuya is a steady, non-comedic rock in Get Out. Okay, And Get Out, there's a lot of crazy things going on. There's some absurd things. There's comedy, but he's a pretty grounded character throughout the whole film, and that helps that film because you sympathize with him even in all the silliness and madness. Here's another casting example for the movie The Exorcist. Okay, if you haven't seen The Exorcist, this is a really horrific movie with a girl being possessed by the devil and spitting out vomit, and her head spins around. She says all these crazy things. So originally, Stanley Kubrick, the great director, had the rights to The Exorcist, but he decided that casting a 12-year-old girl was impossible. Like, you don't have someone who can play this part, a 12-year-old girl who can do all these things. You can't do the movie. William Friedkin, another director, gets the rights to The Exorcist from Kubrick. He realizes Kubrick's right and he despairs, but then Linda Blair auditions for the role. She discusses masturbation, shocking the director in the audition. Okay. Friedkin realizes he has the actor for the role, and the movie gets made and becomes a classic. Casting is key. Here we see a bunch of different people. Zendaya is very hot. She's extremely popular with the youth. A lot of people want to cast her in her film because she draws in crowds. Back in the day, Schwarzenegger, this bodybuilder, was perfectly cast in the Terminator. That really kind of created his career. Also Conan. Rami Malek, a Persian playing another Persian, playing oh my gosh, I forgot his name, playing the Queen singer in that movie, Bohemian Rhapsody. Alana Haim in Licorice Pizza, a non-actress and someone new to acting, brought a fresh face, so on and so forth. Particularly when you're casting your lead, it's very important to pick someone that the audience is going to identify with, that they like, and can carry the movie. What we're talking about here is finding a star. Finding a star is key to the success of most film. They attract money, they attract audience, and they attract other talent to the project. Other people, oh yeah, I'll be on that film with Bradley Cooper in this case. Hitchcock says a star that is known to the audience saves 20 minutes of screen time. What does he mean? Well, what he means is that if the audience already kind of knows the actor and understands their character a bit, you don't have to spend a lot of time setting up who they are, assuming that you're relying a lot on the actor's natural charisma. So stars are how films get made. Rehearsals, maybe. A lot of actors rehearse, or excuse me, a lot of directors want to rehearse. A lot of directors do not. Okay. Some actors love rehearsing. Some absolutely hate it. In general, the more skilled, the more talented, the more wealthy and appreciated and recognized actors don't want to do it. Okay. And the same with the directors. Sometimes younger directors will do it. Sometimes different projects require rehearsal. It depends on the project itself. Is it an ensemble cast, or is it more about a single person? So here we have some comments from Clint Eastwood and Jim Jarmusch. Eastwood said, sometimes I rehearse with actors, sometimes I don't. Most actors have a pretty good idea coming into it because it's what attracted them to the role. Some are extremely instinctive and grasp the character right on. I've seen it happen in the past that actors come in really good at the start, and then all of a sudden they start killing it with improvement. So that's a danger maybe in rehearsing. One thing to keep in mind, rehearsals are all done in pre-production. This is all done early, never during production. You don't stop shooting to rehearse. I mean, maybe you work on a moment in the scene, but you know, this is all done ahead of time. So moving on, the director's craft, mise en scène, understanding it. Okay, it's the placement of everything on the screen. So mise en scène includes everything. So it's the stage. A mise en scène is a stage design and arrangement of actors and scenes for a film production. Everything in front of the camera is part of mise en scène, from lighting to costumes, set to actors, where it goes, how it's lit, and where the camera is put to film it. So here we see a scene from Guardians of the Galaxy. And the way that they've set this up is very deliberately. There's in the background, Groot is doing something which is comedic. So these two are they're in focus and they're having a conversation, which is very serious. But in the background, something very silly is going on. This only works if they line things up correctly. Okay. So this is all about mise en scène. Where do you place things? Where do you place the camera? Okay, DPs work with the director to compose the shot and place the camera. So that's a mutual decision depending on, their individual roles. They compose the frame. Here we see Spielberg. So in pre-production, the elements of mise en scene are setting and props, costume, hair, and makeup. Most of that is worked out in pre-production. But then once we're shooting, okay, this is when the director really kicks in. This is when the director is really the captain of the ship, because now we're on the water. That's during production, the shooting. Okay, so blocking, positioning of actors and objects on set, the performance, okay, both verbal and movement. All right, camera placement and framing, movement, lighting and color. Now remember, the DP is doing the lighting, but it's going to be to the desires and the specifications of the director. So blocking, placement of actors. I mean, look at this scene here, and you can, just by the way that they're placed, you can tell that these two have had an argument. They're probably in a relationship, perhaps married. And just by the posture and the way they're placed on the couch, we know a lot without ever hearing a word of dialogue. The Coen brothers have fantastic mise en scène. So here we see the cameras placed on a crane high above. We're looking down, and all the lights coming from the back. We have light in this window, but then we have the light on this character is all coming from the back, creating these long shadows, making a very dramatic scene. I mean, in the script, it might have said, character exits apartment. Well, that's not very descriptive, but in this shot, the way they've chosen to shoot it, the where they put the camera and the lighting and the placement says a lot. Wes Anderson, we just watched a Wes Anderson film. Most people know one of his films when they see it because of the color palette, the signature camera moves, overhead shots. Notice the symmetry and the placement of actors. This is from Darjeeling Express. Hitchcock on blocking. The mechanical process of setting up the action is so the actors can move in and bring their emotions to bear. Not spontaneously, however, but under strict supervision. It is the director who is in charge, controlling every movement of the actor. Now, Hitchcock was known to be quite controlling on set. This is not the opinion of most directors, but of many. On his sets, actors weren't free to move and react as they felt. And this rubbed many the wrong way. Hitchcock is known as a perfectionist and a real control freak. We'll talk about that more, okay? But it is important for directors to block actors. They can't just walk around anywhere because they have to be in the light. They have to line up in the proper place to get the shot and the framing that the director is looking for. Considerations in framing. You got your foreground, your midground, and your background. So the director's thinking about all that. You're not just paying attention to the actors. How is the frame filled? Is there depth? Does the background distract? And then the composition, which we see an example of here. Maybe there's a conversation between two characters, but there's a third one here. And what's going on in the background? Is this distracting? And also, where's the focus? Which of these actors are in focus? Is this guy out of focus in this over-the-shoulder shot? So here's some examples for really good examples of mise en scene. Okay, this is from American Beauty. The protagonist here, played by Kevin Spacey, is getting fired. Okay, and this is his boss. Notice the framing. Notice how the mise en scene conveys the emotion of the scene. Look how small he is. Look how awkward and kind of an ugly frame that is, right? Okay, he seems smaller, and the camera is a down angle looking at him. The arrangement of the room looks very bland. The color is blue and depressing, yet there's this light that comes in and just sort of hits him and puts a spotlight. On the other side, we see Brad. The camera angle is low, giving Brad more power, okay? And look how much bigger he is in the frame compared to Kevin Spacey. And we can see the computer in both shots, so we know that this is a reverse angle. Really conveys the dynamic between them in the mise en scene without ever hearing a word. This is later on in the family scene. Notice the lighting and blocking convey the family tension. Notice the light that's on the red roses, which are the motif for the film. You see that repeated throughout the film. Another family scene, we see this family. This is played by the antagonist, Colonel Fitz, and his family. Look at how uncomfortable they all look. All right, this is not a happy family. Look at the symmetry, the uniformity, the cleanliness, but also the dark, dour, monochromatic color scheme. That's all intentional to convey. Look at the mother's posture. She's almost shying away from her husband. Mise en scene. So note the shape of the numbers on the screen and how they frame the protagonist. Anyone notice anything? Well, they're like bars. He looks like he's in jail. This is the reflection of the actor on the screen as he's on his computer, and they've made the numbers look like bars. That was intentional. That wasn't a mistake. And note this, watch your step. Weird little things like that. That's all done very deliberately. These small little details, even this cartoon is done deliberately. Okay, Hitchcock on framing. Everything begins with the actor's face. The face on the screen is in a certain pictorial frame, a close-up or a long shot, depending on the dramatic purpose. The content of the pictorial frame must have impact. The rectangle of the screen must be charged with emotion. Okay, so it's not just about making pretty pictures, but making impactful pictures, ones that resonate emotion beyond just the word spoken. So once again, we're saying show, don't tell. You'll remember that. The story is in the images, not just the dialogue. Now, sometimes directors will use an eyepiece to see the scene as the cameras do, but that's kind of old school. Directors used to just watch the action, they'd look through an eyepiece, but nowadays, they look at a monitor. This is the most common way that people direct. So what they're doing is they're looking, even if you're shooting on film, they will have a video assist camera that's basically lined up with the film camera. It's shooting the same thing. So now directors can see the footage immediately. They know exactly what they've just shot. Now, this really changed the industry, okay? We call this video assist sometimes, and it changed everything. And it started coming in basically the 21st century. And most films, nearly all, even commercials, anything will have this. This allows the filmmakers to see the scene exactly as the audience will, as soon as it's been shot. Okay, so they're not just looking at it live, they're looking at it within the framing, and they're seeing what the audience will see. And so this allows them to correct very small things and make every take better and better. Okay, very important. And it's really changed how people shoot. It's made things more detailed and more precise. Okay, moving on to directing actors. We're on page 35 now. Okay, so we have costume, hair, and makeup choices are made. Once they're on set, we have blocking of actor position and movement. Often the directors will follow the actor's lead on a character. I mean, that's why you cast them, right? Director evaluates actor performance and the quality of takes, guides the cast towards the desired outcome. Very often the director is just the referee, making sure that the action, much like a sporting event, much like the play, is fair and it works. If someone's starting to dominate or they're not getting the right emotional note, that's when the director steps in, okay? And most importantly, the director decides whether or not to move on. Does he have what he wants? Did he get the necessary emotion and interaction that he was looking for, or did he not? Only then does he say, okay, let's move on to another shot. So they're conveying their vision. Here we see Martin Scorsese working with Leonardo DiCaprio. And the director's number one job is to sit and watch the action and determine if what is happening in the frame is truthful. Okay? Does it read? Is it real? Is it entertaining? Does it fit the tone of the movie? If not, go again until you get what you want. This is from a director. This is what the director does. That's the main thing. That's the number one decision that they're making on set that no one else can really make. Well, is that a good take? Okay. So they will keep shooting until they get the performance that they want. We see Spike Lee here directing or showing Adam Driver what he just did. They got actors to bring out the best performance. And let's hear from another director again on how to work with actors.
I leave them alone, the actors. That really is good. Get good actors and then let them be good. I'm serious. Ray Fiennes said that the directing he got on Spider was the least directing he ever got on any movie he made, and I took that as a huge compliment. It's not that you don't do work with the actor, but a lot of it happens before you get on the set. You know, you're talking to them about the script, about the character. You're working with them. What kind of hair does Spider have? Does he ever wash it? It's a mess. You know, does he ever shave? Can this guy who's so dysfunctional, is he actually capable of shaving? How ripped is the inside of his coat? You know, is it hanging? Does he sleep in his coat? Where does he sleep? All of this stuff you talk about. And by the time Ray came on the set, he had that character nailed. I didn't have to say anything to him. You know, I would just follow him, really. I mean, it's almost like a documentary at that point, you know. You block the scene with him, yes, but then I feel like I'm shooting something that I've discovered. It's almost like found art. And I literally had some directors of Observer.
Okay, very good. Great comments. This is the great Cronenberg on directing actors. Okay, moving on. Hitchcock on acting and dialogue. Now, before we read this, it should be said that Hitchcock didn't think a lot of actors. He thought them and used them just like puppets. But let's listen. A good screen actor is an actor who does nothing with his face, but in a convincing way. Then it is up to the director through the cutting to show the exact meaning of the actor's face. This is pure cinema. And in pure cinema, dialogue is a secondary thing. Fascinating. Okay. So he's really saying the meaning of the scene is conveyed through framing, staging of action, the editing. And this is how the director. Now, again, Hitchcock was very controlled. Not all directors work this way. Some of them really let the actors lead, and then they're really just sort of documenting the performance, as we just saw with Cronenberg. A couple more comments. I'll let you read most of this, but I just wanted to point out what Ken Loach says. He says, you have to shoot the shock, because even the most talented actor will have trouble being shocked twice. Think about that. If you want to surprise somebody with something, don't tell them about it and then shoot the shock. Working with actors, tell them to never stop acting till you say cut, because sometimes in those weird, awkward moments, you'll get something. Work on voice intensity, not volume. Give them physical business or an object to play with if it's going to help them in the scene. And sometimes you have to share hidden personal goals of the character in the scene to sort of motivate them. And occasionally actors will get lost in a scene. They need the director to help them find the right note for the performance. And this is when the director steps in. Doesn't happen a lot, but this is when the director steps in and gives them a few notes or even some real direct guidance on what to do to sort of help an actor who's, not as unsure. Now, there's different types of sets, okay? Big films and small films, low budget and high budget, right? Smaller, intimate sets allow the director to work with the cast and get the subtle performances they want. And this is typical of independent films or auteur films, smaller films, okay? Greta Gerwig on the set of Lady Bird, Tarantino directing Harvey Keitel on his first film, Reservoir Dogs, which was much smaller budget. It happened basically in one set with about 5 or 6 actors, okay? So, smaller crews with less special effects mean performance and mise en scène can be focused on, okay? There's also large shoots, okay, big stuff like Transformers. They require a bullhorn. You're not going for the same thing. You're not trying to coach a subtle performance of someone who has to cry. You're yelling at people to run this way. So this type of filmmaking is, armies of workers moving lighting gear around. Here we see Michael Bay on the set of Transformers. So large scale movie production is very different. Here we see Star Wars. I believe this is from Life Aquatic. You have a lot of technical elements, and you might be incorporating stunts and pyrotechnics and lighting effects and all this different stuff. So money is burning constantly, and it's also can be quite unsafe. So this is a different type of directing. It's more like you're conducting a giant orchestra with dangerous tools in their hands. And this is when the director is a field marshal. Now here's a scene from Ben-Hur, a Hollywood award-winning film from 1959. And look at this, was all built. Everything you see here was built, and they actually had people operating these chariots. Okay, this was all real. There was no CGI. There was nothing faked. And this is a very different type of directing. You have to get all the departments on the same page at the same time. You have to direct the background action. The extras can't be looking at the camera. You have to direct your special effects and your stunts. Are they ready? Takes them more time to get ready, to reset. And it's highly technical and even dangerous. And on this particular film, one of the chariot drivers did die. So we want to distinguish a couple of things between directors. Everything that we've talked about, all directors do, but there's two different types of directors that I want to point out. So you have an auteur, like an artist, and you have a working director. Okay, a lot of times in this class, I'm talking about this group of auteurs, people whose names you might know: Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson, whose film we just watched, Quentin Tarantino. Okay, they're directing big name films and their personal projects. They have a lot to say. It's an art piece. It's a creative endeavor for them. But many more directors are like Ruben Fleischer, who directed Venom and Zombieland, a working director who's brought in to complete a project, hired by a producer, and doesn't have the same kind of creative control that an auteur has. Let's look. So the auteur is an artist. Okay, their name is mentioned in the ads. It's medium to high budget. They may write the script, or they're heavily involved. They make all the creative traditions, and often they co-produce as well, so they can be involved in all the decisions. The working director is an employee. The name is not mentioned in the ads. Low budget genre films or high-end mega pictures. Okay, a lot of horror films are directed by first-time directors, and if they do well, they might get a high-end mega picture. Okay, all TV shows, they manage the actors in shooting. Other creative decisions are made by producers. So here's the story of Ruben Fleischer. He's an American film director, and his first film was Zombieland, which did pretty well. Some of you might have saw that. Okay. Even did a sequel, and it had a $23 million budget. They made 75 million, 105 million worldwide. So, hey, he did good. 4-time return on budget. Good job, Ruben. After the success of Zombieland, he got an even bigger film, Gangster Squad, more than twice the budget, 60 million. Okay. 40 million for PR. So they're dropping 100 million on it. Look at even the worldwide gross, they barely made their money back. Okay, so that film broke even, didn't do so great. 7 years after the failure of Gangster Squad, he got Venom. And I'm sure many of you saw Venom, the sort of Spider-Man spinoff of one of his greatest villains. Okay, so he was only one of several directors. There were CGI directors, fight coordinators, action sequence, all that. He was in charge of acting scenes primarily. He was rarely invited to the editing room. He had no say in costume. Every day there were meetings, little time to work with the actors. Much was already decided before he was even brought on the project, and little chance for his own creativity. He was there to do a job. He was a hired employee to watch the actors, make sure that the performances were true, and that was about it. What is the auteur? Okay, so who is the auteur, or the author of a film? Okay, is it the screenwriter, the producer, the director? So auteur theory states that it's the director. Okay, it's the director who oversees the audio visual elements of the motion picture, is more considered the author of a movie than the writer of the screenplay or the producer. Okay, when the Oscar goes to Best Picture, it goes to the producer because they built the ship. But there's also an award for Best Director, and the director is most associated with the artistic merits of the film. It's considered their film. You go to see a Kubrick film, a Nolan film, so on and so forth. Okay, and auteurs have their own individual style. So they have the director's personal vision, their trademarks, their personal style. They may be involved. They're usually very involved in the screenplay. Even if they don't write it, they edit it. Personal topics. And this is really film as art. All of Wes Anderson films are Wes Anderson films. The topics, the cast, the way the actors perform, it's all his style. Now, there's another important person I want to bring your attention to, and this is the assistant director, okay? Also called the first AD. Let's remember these terms. These are good quiz terms, and we're on page 36 now, okay? So the first AD, the assistant director, is not the gopher for the director. He's not the director's assistant. He's actually the representative of the producer on set. He's there to make sure that the film works. He is the vice principal to the principal, right? In your high school, maybe the vice principal was the heavy. Well, that's the AD on set. He's making sure that everything works on time. So the director can focus on the creative and the intimate and the personal aspects of making the film. So the AD yells commands like quiet on set and rolling. He's the director's general on set, tells everyone what to do and where to go and to get ready. He maintains the shooting schedule. He's worried about time. The director is concerned with getting the performance in the shot. The AD is concerned with getting the shot on time and on schedule. Understand? They maintain the shooting schedule and they plan the company moves. They command a whole crew of PAs, production assistants, and also a second AD. And they also create the shot list. They build that. All right. So here's what an assistant director does. You can look at that. They usually get paid very well. Film school is not required. They are the persuader, the organizer, the builder. Okay. Now, it's not really considered a creative position, although solving problems is creative, but they're crucial to the success of a production. They are the planners and the drivers that keep the crew on task and on budget and on schedule. Here's an example of the shooting schedule, which is created by the AD. Okay, this is not the director's job. This is the AD's job. One is focused on performance and creativity. One is focused on money and time. So the director must be well prepared, but still able to improvise. Okay, you come in with a plan, but then things go wrong and you've got to improvise. You've got to figure out ways to get the shot with less time. So I want to talk about how they use the camera. These are two major distinctions between directors. And in truth, most directors will use both. Okay, one is called objective camera. The other is called subjective camera. All right. So the objective camera is an objective point of view. The camera is stationary. The audience is an observer. Okay, the audience, as watching the action through the lens of the camera, is an observer. Okay, recording the action from a distance and without style. Okay, almost like a documentary. Just put the camera, record the actors acting. Subjective point of view, the camera moves as the subject. Maybe the camera follows someone down steps. The audience experiences the scene as the character through the camera. The camera is a participant, recording the action while a part of it. Okay, so an objective camera, we're set up here and we're just recording these actors in this scene, perfectly positioned here to argue. All right, same thing, stationary camera in 2001, just recording the acting taking place. But, you know, this is a scene from The Raid, an action film. Often the cameras in action films will be handheld and they'll move with the fight scene to sort of give the audience the feeling of what's happening in that fight scene. And we see the same thing here. This is like a GoPro. We, the audience, are going on the ride. We're not watching him take a ride. We're on the ride. So subjective camera versus objective. So in films that we've already seen, when the camera is stationary, recording the action, it's objective, as we see here in this scene from Adaptation. When the camera gets into the action, it's objective, as we see in this scene from Grand Budapest Hotel. Camera treatment, The Big Lebowski. Now, most films will have both. You know, it's not as though a director just works in one style. I just want to point these out as ways of using the camera. So in some scenes, the camera is just there recording the conversation. We have two conversations. Other times, we have a gun pointing at the camera and it goes out of focus, so we become aware of the camera. In this scene, this character is talking directly to the camera. So in these instances, the camera is subjective. We become aware of the camera. You're not aware of the camera in objective usage. Okay, so camera and objective, camera tends to be distant, allowing the action to unfold. Longer takes to allow for actors to really perform. Camera tends to be stationary, it can move. Less director style. In subjective, variety of angles creating meaning, shorter takes, cutting to new angles or for dramatic punch. Camera tends to move to enhance action or drama, more director heavy and stylized. So in Wes Anderson films, we see a very stylized use of the film, very formalistic, not necessarily even natural, subtle. It's designed to call attention to itself. So in subjective camera, the director is calling attention to his use of camera. In objective camera usage, the director is not. He's saying, pay attention to the story and the acting. In subjective cameras, I'm going to enhance the story and the acting with my use of camera. Also, we have something called a POV shot, which is also a subjective camera of use. This is when the camera is essentially the point of view, POV, point of view of an actor. So here we see it used in Kill Bill. Here we see it used in a classic 40s film with Lauren Bacall. POV, a subjective camera usage. In Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino uses a POV of the captured German soldier. The low angle and POV shot conveys the helpless position the man is in. Hitchcock on camera. Simple movements in tracking the movements of the actors. The camera follows a character, but the audience should never be aware of the camera. That's objective. So he's just saying what I just said. Dramatic movement of the camera, such as a dolly up to the face of the character for emphasis, or a dolly way at the end of the scene to reveal a lonely figure standing alone. So use the camera may be said to be making a statement. It's subjective. Subjective camera is used to make a statement. Objective camera captures action. So in this scene from the Batman, they're just talking, camera captures. Subjective camera and Baby Driver, we're seeing the driver's point of view. So here is the Inarritu on directing actors or directing approaches. A couple of different approaches here, all right? A couple of different approaches that directors have, all right? So we have the dictator, and of course, Hitchcock is here. Director dominated, carefully planned, highly technical, which makes it suitable for large-scale, action-oriented productions like the ones James Cameron tends to direct. Director style, not collaboration. He's not looking for a lot of input. He's coming in with a plan. And it usually is control over experimentation. Federico Fellini was very much that way. And of course, David Fincher, very precise, very perfectionist. The negotiator, this contrasts the dictator. They're very collaborative, experimental, less planned, less controlled, more like, let's get on set and see what happens. Greta Gerwig is known to be very collaborative with her actors. Of course, she was an actor. Robert Altman is the ultimate example of this. He often starts shooting without a formalized script. He basically has the characters in mind. He lets the actors improvise on set, as did John Cassavetes. In this way, the director becomes the president of a democracy. Okay, a much different approach. Both are very valid. Both have produced great films, one with a lot of control, one with a lot of democracy. Now, there's two other ways to approach. Some people work very pragmatically. In other words, they don't take a lot of time. They don't do a lot of takes. Limited takes, work efficiently, modest budget, trust actors, simpler technical elements. This is Clint Eastwood, Woody Allen. Typically, older directors, they have a less demanding schedule. Hey, man, let's just get this thing done and not kill ourselves. That contrasts with the perfectionist. Stanley Kubrick would do 50, 100 takes of a scene until he got exactly what he wanted. Bong Joon-ho, who directed Parasite, known to be very similar. He wants everything to be perfect. Now, usually these films have a larger budget, unlimited takes to get the performance desired, great attention to detail and everything, which means they'll retake and reshoot and take a lot of time to get it right. And they're often consumed with every aspect of the production, pushing their cast and their crew. So I want to look at another sort of different approach to directing. And again, all directors are going to use both of these approaches. These aren't exclusive styles. Okay, so we've looked at how a couple of directors approach the set. Now let's look at, again, how they use the camera. So we have long takes versus montage. Okay. So long takes are when the camera is running and they're, say, recording James Bond walking across this balcony here. And montage is also called scene coverage. And that's where you shoot a conversation from a bunch of different angles, as we see here. Start with an establishing shot, go to a master, an over the shoulder, now and punch into a classic close-up. This is kind of what I explained to you guys in the beginning of the class. This is classic Hollywood style coverage. Okay. So directors will approach each scene differently and film according to their inclinations and budget. So depending on what you need, you might use both of these techniques. Let's look at the difference. So long takes means that shots in which the camera is running for a long time. Okay, the actors remain in character and they act as long as the camera is recording the action, kind of like theater. All right. And this allows the actors to perform, to really get into character without breaks. Long takes heighten the dramatic tension and draw the audience in. Okay. So the Birdman director, who's the film you're going to be watching coming up, his name is Inarritu, and he uses a lot of long takes in that film. In fact, the whole film is made to look like one long take. It isn't. Okay. There's places where they sneak cuts. We'll talk about that, but it looks like one long take. Now, it's difficult to pull off. It's really difficult to pull off, and rehearsals are needed. Slows down the film, heightens the tension, focuses it on the performance, which means you have to have really good actors. And it's less reliant on editing. You can't get yourself bailed out in the editing because you're doing long takes, not a bunch of different angles of the same action that you can cut to. Okay. So when you're doing montage, you're shooting the scene from a bunch of different angles. It relies on numerous shots to create the scene. Okay. So you shoot the scene from multiple angles and you put the scene together in editing. In some ways, it's safer because you have a bunch of different shots. We'll make the decision later when we see what we've got. Okay. So it's two different ways of shooting. This is the standard way of shooting in Hollywood. That's why I put a nominal person here. You need multiple setups to create the various angles. In other words, you shoot a master, you shoot an over shoulder, you shoot a close-up, you cover the scene, okay? And it allows the film to be built in the editing, okay? It requires the actor to do the scene repeatedly. So the difference now is they don't have to remember long speeches, but they've got to be able to get their emotion up for a scene that they're doing over and over and over again. They're basically acting the scene all day, okay, rather than doing it once dramatically and capturing it in a long take. Here's a couple of diagrams. Here you see examples of coverage where we shoot a conversation from three different angles. And here, this is the diagram for the interior of the set of Burning Man, and of Birdman. And the red lines here represent the movement of the camera. Okay, this is all the different things that the camera is doing in one single shot, capturing all these different scenes in different rooms. Montage, scene coverage. This is how it's shot, as we've explained. A master shot, over the shoulder, punch in for close-ups. Okay. A long take. We're going to see this long take in Birdman. He gets locked outside the theater. The theater's in Times Square. He's in his underwear, and he has to run around in Times Square in his underwear. And they shot this in one long take to heighten the tension and make the audience feel what the protagonist feels. Okay. So these are all different styles. And then, wrapping up here, we're talking about montage versus long takes. Okay. Editing that uses cuts to place shots in conversation with one another. And then long takes, where shots last for a long time and keep the elements of a scene in deep focus, letting the viewer choose his or her points of emphasis. And this leads us to Hollywood style. And Hollywood style strives to make the reader or the viewer forget the medium of film altogether. And the effect feels natural to those who are viewing the film. Okay. And this is derived largely from using montage. Okay. So last conversation, Hollywood style. Camera doesn't call attention to itself. It's an objective camera. We talked about objective. It's sort of, just observing and capturing the action. All right. They shoot montage style. So we've got a combination of objective camera and montage. In other words, we shoot the scene from many different angles and we put it together in editing. Very rarely do you see a lot of long takes or subjective camera in Hollywood style. A little bit, Okay, we're talking classic Hollywood style. The editing is invisible, and it's continuity editing. We'll talk about that in a bit, but basically it doesn't call attention to itself. Events flow in a natural time space. It makes sense to the viewer. Most films today use some sort of Hollywood style. It's the foundational language for all American filmmaking. So, you know, Casablanca is classic Hollywood style, but we'll see Hollywood style today in any film that's made. At least half the film is basic Hollywood style. Okay. So all films made today, they owe something. It's the basis for Hollywood storytelling. Shooting coverage of the scene, montage style from different angles, from different objective angles, and then editing it together in post. So Hollywood style is objective, okay? Objective camera, just watching the action, and it's also montage. So we shoot the action from multiple angles and we edit together in post, okay? So here we have a couple examples from Tarantino films where he's using basic Hollywood style. The conversation in the diner in Pulp Fiction, the conversation in Inglourious Basterds between the two men, and so on and so forth. But we also see, as an example of auteur theory, we also see Tarantino using this is kind of one of his trademarks, using from inside the trunk low angle POV shot, right? In Pulp Fiction, in Reservoir Dogs, and in Inglourious Basterds. Okay, so this is an example of him being an auteur, going beyond Hollywood style. No director completely ignores Hollywood style. They take a few elements from it and then they bend them to their will. Perhaps the most significant and important thing about a director is his style. The style is evidenced in both his choice of subject and the manner in which he films it. Okay, so let's take a look at Wes Anderson as we take a look at all the great director styles. Wes Anderson, so his visual style is formalistic, colorful, a lot of symmetry, a lot of fantasy, subjective camera, okay, whip pans, tracking shots. All right, he uses a lot of symmetry in his composition. Comic editing, quick, subjective editing, direct to camera. And we see this throughout all of his films. Symmetrical framing, tracking shots where the camera follows along with the action, elaborate, fantastic set pieces, very detailed graphics and props, and also stills. He'll cut away to stills, vivid color and detail. All these packaging had to be made. Okay, when you see these things, it's a Wes Anderson. And of course, miniatures. He loves his miniatures. Now, here's a quote by Wes Anderson on his style. I'm going to leave this here for you to read. Just simply stop the film for a second, and we're going to move to the wrap up. Let's mention a couple other famous directors who have their style. Jordan Peele, he's doing stories of psychological terror and the African-American experience. That's his style. That's the lane that he's carved out. Robert Eggers, who directed The Lighthouse, The Norseman, fantasy, horror, and gore, psychological terror, beautifully shot. Also, we want to mention that women directors are finally getting more opportunities. This is Patty Jenkins directing Wonder Woman. Here's some of the young directors getting new opportunities. You're going to see films from them coming up. And finally, directors pour their heart and soul into their films, as we see in this quote from Werner Herzog. Okay, let's go to the review. So director duties, casting, script analysis, picking key creatives like the DP to work with, coaching the performance, that's really important, and working with the actors, all right? And then, of course, another main job is mise en scene. Okay, this is all the things they're responsible for: camera placement, framing, blocking, and executing visual storytelling. Let's not forget, we have our quiz in 2 weeks, or in 2 weeks from the date that you're watching this. Camera, is it subjective or objective? These are just different ways the director can work. They could also use a POV shot, which is a subjective example. Are they going to be using a lot of long takes or montage? Most directors work in montage. What about the angles they're using? Do they have very distinct angles like Tarantino they use a lot, or framing? When you think about directors, are they a working director or an auteur? Are they a pragmatist or a perfectionist? Are they working quickly or taking a lot of detail? Are they a dictator on the set, or are they a negotiator? Let's not forget what our assistant director does, and also the importance of director style. I believe that's it for today. So hope you guys have enjoyed the lecture. I'm out of focus, and from out of focus land, I say goodbye to you.